A comment came about and it said, need your help on setting up a lab for Commvault learning purposes. So in my videos here, I go over how to set up Active Directory and Commvault and all that. So the very first thing when you're planning, you want to have a good beefy server. Mine in particular is a Dell server. I have a 32 gig of RAM or 32 CPUs, 64 gig of RAM, and I have a 4 terabyte RAID 5. I have a 2 terabyte RAID 5, and then there's some local drives on it. So the ComServe is the first thing. In my ComServe, I have the ComServe. Like I said, my ComServe. So if I click on it, so you have a ComServe, and I'll just go over all of them. In my ComServe, which has got Commvault, of course, the ComServe, I have Active Directory, Active Directory users and computer. Active Directory just creating accounts essentially. Then my WinSCP on my drives. I have my C drive, D drive, I, and S drive. So all I did was just DDB for D, index cache or index drive is I, and then storage policy basically for backups is your S drive. The thing to take in consideration when you do this is your network here. So properties, and you can watch some of my videos on it, but basically how to set up Active Directory. Anytime you join a computer to this Active Directory, like whatever domain you pick, any other servers, you're going to have to note in the DNS entry in the other servers, you're going to have to put this in, which is the domain controller IP, which is 172.16.32.10. In this case, it's 127.0.0.1. Note that when you set up your environment. Like I said, I have Active Directory in here. This is a ComServe, and I Brave as the browser. The reason I use WinSCP, if I need to move files from this ComServe to like a tar file to install Linux or on a media agent or Linux media agent or file system, I use WinSCP to move it over to that to the Linux environment. Makes it easier for me. So for the media agent itself, this is a media agent. Just a normal media agent. And I got the C drive, I got the DDB drive, the index cache, and the storage policy. Same thing. As noted before, the IP address. So this is the IP address or the DNS, let's say, is going to be 32.10, which is the IP address of the domain controller that you notice. So in that, I just have regular Commvault, the media agent. That's all. Nothing more than nothing fancy about it. And then in my Observian, which I haven't talked about yet, that is a tool that monitors the environments, the different devices. So there's all devices. You can add them. Real easy to do it. This tells you about the server itself. This is a ComServe, and this is the media agent. Yeah. So click on it. It'll tell you the processor information, the memory, the C drives, like what's the capacity of it, what type it is, hardware, graphs, health, logs, resources, processors, memory, storage, trending or not. Serial number for the different drives, digital drives, of course. Now there is a way to add it as like a Active Directory. I just haven't done it yet. I just put the IP address in. This will tell you all the information about the servers, your environment. The reason you want to get this for your lab is because when you go to work for, like, say you work for MSP, they use this. It's called Logic Monitor. It's very similar to this. And if you work for MSP, and let's say you're, because the trend now is to send Commvault positions, outsource it to different locations in the world. And in that, you need to use these programs. So you need to Logic Monitor, EM7, whatever. Yeah. So when you use this tool, you can't very well monitor all these real time. You can't, I'm going to log in every server. It doesn't work that way. Maybe you know this, maybe you don't. If you know this about, working for a company, any company really for that matter, they want to be able to monitor their servers real time, not log into them every day and check them. So this is what this gives you access to. What happens is in the real world, you would log in to Observian or Logic Monitor for that matter, and you would set up alerts. And these alerts will create tickets essentially. Like Logic Monitor will assign a ticket to ServiceNow, and the ServiceNow noted as like a P1, P2, etc. And then you have usually like a help desk, or sometimes even you have like a workflow and automation that'll call someone on the list if it's like a P1 or a P2. And you come in and you log in and say, oh, what's the issue? Oh, okay, this is the issue. It's not a big deal. Maybe there's a loss of power. Maybe the drive's down completely. That's a big issue. So your job is to come in and just look at it and determine what the issue is. What can I do about it? If you don't have no space left, for instance, maybe one of your drives is offline. Maybe you don't have network connectivity. You wouldn't necessarily be able to see it if you had network connectivity was offline. Yeah, like device availability. And this is a graph. Your health status, your processor, your memory, etc. So that is how to monitor your environment. And I say to put this in a lab environment because you're going to be using it in the real world. Okay, on to the other ones. So you have your gateway, Commvault gateway. And then you have your laptop. So if you want to simulate how to install a laptop, that's a very good skill to have. What it looks like, when you push, you're going to pretend like you're a user adding Edge or whatever the software is, Commvault Edge, I think it is, to your laptops. And you'll be able to see what it looks like, how does it install, so that when you go and work for a company, you're going to have an idea of how to actually install Commvault on a laptop. What does it do? It looks a little different than regular, like if you put it in a file system or a media agent. It behaves differently, let's say. And then the other one for your lab is a out of band or a different network media agent or file agent, whatever, in a totally different network. And what you're going to do is you're connect from this 192 network through the quote unquote internet to the Commvault gateway. It sounds a lot more complicated than it really is. But effectively, what you're trying to do is you're trying to connect from a 192 network to the internet, from the internet to the gateway, from the gateway connect to the CommServe. And you can use VPN. There's different things you can do. I may create a couple videos on that later on about it. But that's your environment, your lab environment, essentially. And you can upscale, you can add things. Like, for instance, this Commvault Win MA01, that has I installed DB2 on it. I installed Oracle database and SQL database on the same server. It's just a matter of how much space you have or how much permissions you have to do it. Yeah, the other thing you can do and add is I haven't added TrueNAS here because TrueNAS would be perfect for your file system. Essentially, it simulates file system like a NetApp or a Quantum or Data Domain or something like that, or even a cloud environment. It can simulate that. The reason I haven't added it yet is because there's a in Proxmox when you add TrueNAS, you have to change the serial numbers on every individual drive that you add in order for it to work. So that's why I haven't done it yet on that one. All in all, this lab, like once you have the server, you have pretty good internet, let's say, it's going to take you probably, let's say 3 hours for this ComServe with internet and download and get everything ready. Probably another hour and a half for you put SQL and Oracle and DB2 on that, and probably another hour for the media agent. Probably another same thing, hour for the laptop. Observian's probably like an hour. And then setting up just initially, the Commvault software and Linux, it's going to probably take like an hour just for that. So all in all, you're probably looking at a full weekend just to set up your lab environment. And then, oh, by the way, in like 60 days, the temporal license expires. So you have to start over again. Yeah, that's the fun part about it. The good thing is you can just uninstall Commvault on most of these, well, all of these actually, fully get them off as long as you have your Windows server still there. Your Windows server is good for 160 days, no, 180 days. You have 6 months really, and you probably get you could probably get 3 install Commvault, in your environment 3 times essentially. So every time you just set it up again and then install it. And the other thing to take consideration when you set up your lab environment, probably nobody tells you about this, Buzz, have a template. So set up your Commvault, whatever it is, client, Windows client, whatever it is. Get it set up nice and neat. Have all the drives, all that. And instead of recreating everything, just right click and you can clone it. So you can clone this drive, this Windows environment, Windows 10, this laptop. You can clone, if you got it to where it doesn't have any Commvault in it yet, installed on it, but it still has the software, you can just right click and clone it. So it'll save you some time in that regard. You don't have to reset up the IP addresses and all that. It's already done. So you can clone, after setting up Active Directory and prior to setting Commvault, you can just clone all these and keep them somewhere of course, on the same drive. Now, if you have an issue ever with support on Proxmox, you have to pay for it. But just a regular environment, it doesn't cost you anything to do this. It just costs you time and power and hard drive space. Yeah, on my server, the other thing in consideration, probably don't people talk about this, is a nice cool environment, cool area. If you live in an area where it's like 130 degrees, 120 degrees, 100 degrees all the time, and it's that temperature in the room, probably not a good idea to set up a lab in there. Unless you're there and you have a fan on it constantly and then you turn it off after you're done, I wouldn't leave it running. The other thing is your power. So you can go and buy like a amperage power, like at a store or wherever you're at. It'll just tell you the load it's putting on. And here, for instance, it'll say, well, the CPU load, server load, memory usage, network traffic. Sometimes they say average. Yeah, sometimes it'll say the actual power usage as well here somewhere sometimes. But that way you don't over provision your circuit. Most circuits are 10 amp, even over in other countries they're 220. I think it's 15 amp, I think. So probably you're running it 10 amp. Probably gonna run 10 or 10 amps for this server, this lab environment. And last thing is, I have a course on Udemy. I'll put the show notes on it. Basically, it's just a help desk course. it talks about how to set up a lot of this stuff, like how to set up Active Directory, how to set up Windows, how to set up RAID configuration, how to set up networking, basic networking, on a switch and a router. And that'll complement your lab as well. I know that if you just want it for Commvault, you already know how to do this stuff, you're good. But if you've never done any of this stuff and you just want to buy a server and do it on your own, then I think that help desk course has been, that's why I wrote it essentially, or created it for that reason. So that people who don't know anything about IT come in and just buy a product, buy $100 server off eBay or Facebook Marketplace or wherever, and then create their lab environment. And then even if they work at whatever environment, whatever place, Walmart, McDonald's, whatever, they can at least spend a weekend learning it and getting together step by step and start the process of getting a job in tech or IT. So that's the whole goal. Next course or next video, I should say, is going to be something maybe I'll talk about backing up or configuring RMAN, which would be Commvault Oracle. I'll do a video on RMAN, which is Oracle Deep backup, IBM DB2, and then SQL. Probably the same video. It'll be about 30-minute video. Thanks a lot. We'll see you in the next one.